Come back a little there. A little more. Yeah, webcams just have not evolved at all. I was gonna throw mics on there. Just pop those on too. Could you send me the Vive box, please? Okay, yeah, I'll do it. Sorry. Oh, it's heavy.
Yeah.
No, it's just a stereo mic, so I can point one at either one of you.
Right.
And I will be kind of on the centre. For whatever reason, the precise combination of software and cables is actually mixing it all down to mono on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, say something.
Something.
Okay.
Test 1, 2, 3.
Well, I'm not getting any levels on this, so let's just assume it's okay. Right. Okay, let's do this thing. Right, so, gentlemen. I can't think of anything to say. Okay, so today we're here with Rob Knight and Dominic Tarr. Rob is one of the folks from this new venture capital project that we're putting together, and Dominic is from a project called Secure Scuttlebutt. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi. So my name, I'm Dominic. Secure Scuttlebutt is, I think the best thing is that this is a secure gossip system. So a scuttlebutt is the cask that today's water ration is stored in on an old sailing ship. So it has exactly the same connotations of gossip as as the water cooler or something like this. Basically it's a protocol where information travels in the manner of gossip from one node to another node and so on. But unlike regular human gossip, it's secure. So one intermediary node can't change what you're saying. So there's no like Chinese whispers problem.
I see. And you personally, how did you get interested in such a thing?
Well, I had wanted to build a platform for distributed applications that works offline and stuff. Part of this was, I think I started on this path. I was living in a swamp, in a sailboat in a swamp in New Zealand, and I didn't have internet on my boat, so the situation of not being connected to the internet wasn't wrong. I needed systems that worked even if you were offline or in connection and like had unreliable connections. Like I grew up on a farm where the best we ever got it was a satellite connection which had like 1 second latency. I don't assume that being always connected is like is going to happen anytime soon. And then you can daydream that out to be like, well, space exploration, you're limited by light speed, so you're going to be back. It's going to be back kind of like sailing ships
Yeah,
You're not
absolutely.
going to be able to get instantaneous real time.
9,
low
12,
latency.
15 light minutes to Mars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the close one. Jupiter, Saturn, it's like far worse. But
2.5 hours, something like that.
a long time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even the second, so like to the moon, it's a second and a half.
Wow.
So
Wow.
which
Which is just enough to make conversation impossible, right?
yeah.
Yeah. I'm still kind of stuck on you living on a boat in a swamp.
Mm-hmm.
Are you basically telling us that you're Yoda?
Well, I think you're a better likeness of Yoda, actually.
Somewhere between Yoda and Jabba the Hutt. It's not that funny. Rob's on it. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Where to start? So yeah, I'm Rob Knight. I'm working with Vinay on the venture capital project. My background is in software development, software project management, various mixture of interesting and very boring things. I don't live on a boat in a swamp, and so I don't have like that degree of experience with those kinds of exotic conditions. But I think, like everybody, I've kind of seen the same variability in lots of different kinds of internet connectivity over the years, ranging from ancient 1980s modems all the way up to fiber optics and so on now. And it's kind of it. I kind of agree. It's kind of something we've come to take for granted, that connectivity is just always on. It's just kind of there. If it's not low latency and available, we kind of look at it like it's not working. And actually, that's really just a product of the conditions that we're in. That's not a product of the fundamental reality of engineering these systems for, as you say, interplanetary communications or whatever else it might be. And it's kind of always amusing when you see some science fiction which blatantly disregards the physics involved and does appear to have very long range instantaneous communications. It's really it's good to be reminded of the actual engineering reality.
And also when you look at places outside the first world, basically very crappy internet is the default if you can get it. And even though people might have cell phones, they probably can't afford data. So the infrastructure actually might be there, but
they can't afford access to it.
Yeah.
I mean, this place here, when we initially got it, had 8 megabits of connection. So, I moved in and it was just about broadband. Terrible latency, lots of downtime, totally unpredictable. And then about 9 months in, hyper optic came up and ran fiber to the building. And my quality of service, I mean, in raw speed terms, improved by 125 times overnight. I mean, it was literally just they threw a switch, 125 times faster. And I can't think of another utility that could potentially have improved by a factor of 125 times. Like, imagine if your mains electricity got 125 times cheaper. It would go from a bill of 30 quid a month to 30 pence a month.
Or maybe going from piped plumbing to having to walk a couple of k's with a bucket.
Yeah, exactly. So it was just a huge step function thing for essentially no physical change in the environment. 2 kilograms of matter might have moved in the form of them running a cable or something, but it was just there's something magical about that. But the fact that in London, 500 meters from a train station, from a tube station, like in a transport hub with a huge shopping mall nearby and 4,000 or 5,000 people living on the kind of estate, that they only just got it turned on. I mean, something very weird is happening.
Yeah, and even as privileged Westerner, you can go travelling, and then you're in a strange airport, or like once you're out of your own country, it's a pretty damn good chance that you'll be stuck and disconnected things, or even just a busy cafe. Wi-Fi doesn't. Because Wi-Fi just isn't designed to work for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. The Wi-Fi is down.
Yeah. Or it's just too crowded.
Yeah.
It's basically like it works on radio, and radio is like shouting. So everyone shouts at once.
Yeah.
Great.
What are those base stations called that are really resistant to that? Barracudas or something?
I'm not sure.
I don't know. There's one that whenever I see it at a conference, I'm like, oh yeah, that's the good one, the Wi-Fi will work, and if I don't see that particular brand, it never works. It's something like Barracuda.
Yeah.
So, let's wade into the crypto. Right. So we've obviously come out of this kind of blockchain frenzy. First Bitcoin, then Ethereum, now Zero Cash, layer after layer after layer of this incredibly aggressive innovation. But in practice, when we use these systems, when you're going to make a payment to somebody, you either look at a web page which has no real security if their server is hacked, and download their address from there, or they send it to you over Google Talk, or they send it to you over Skype, all of which are woefully insecure mediums. So the problem of how do we bind a key to a person is completely unsolved, except using these totally informal mechanisms. Now, way back in the mists of time, and by that I mean the 90s, we had this thing called GPG. And GPG, right, GNU Privacy Guard, before that PGP, Pretty Good Privacy, was a bunch of state-of-the-art encryption, which was enormously offensive to the US government prior to the purchase of PGP Inc. by Network Associates. Network Associates then reversioned PGP from 2.6.2 to 5, removing all the patented algorithms and replacing them with a bunch of roughly equivalent algorithms that weren't patented, after which the US government seems to mysteriously lose all of its hostility to PGP. I know. Moving swiftly on. Also, by the way, the NIST thing, just while we're being crypto paranoid. So National Institute for Standards and Technology takes a cipher that the NSA has backdoored, the cryptographic random number generator, dual ECB deterministic random bit generator, DPRN, whatever it is. Dyslexia acronyms. Right? And everybody is strongly encouraged to use this thing. But it turns out that because it uses an elliptic curve, it is possible, if you know a set of magic numbers which are related to the magic numbers which are inside of the random number generator, that you could take only a little bit of the output of the random number generator and infer the internal state. So essentially they ship a backdoor random number generator because the NSA has the private keys to the random number generator, the public keys are going out for this mechanism. So people don't seem to have spread that paranoia to the rest of the ciphers of the NIST suite, but it seems logical that you'd have to.
Well, there were people that pointed out the problem with this random number generator is it needs a setting, a sort of a settings file, and the settings was like basically you have some numbers that are randomly distributed, uniformly distributed, and they presented like, this is the numbers for this one, but they never explained how they got to those. And that meant, well, how do we know those are fair? Like, how do you know that that doesn't have a special property that we don't know about? And when what's considered the right way to do this is you pick it's called a nothing up my sleeve number. So you might use the, so I think SHA-256 has this. I might be wrong about the specific details here, but it uses the the decimal fractions of the first 30 or so prime numbers, of the square roots of the first 30 or so prime numbers, which is uniformly distributed, but they can make a good argument that we didn't choose these numbers, they're just part in the universe.
They're just there, right. That's really interesting. Nothing up my sleeve numbers. I hadn't heard of that.
No, neither had I.
Oh,
but
that's cool.
It seems like such an obvious idea once you know it.
Insert something about the year the Cubs would win the World Series here.
Exactly. So other protocols have in the NIST suite, like SHA-256 has been very well studied and has things like that. So there's no
cause for
paranoia. That's why they're paranoid about that particular one. If they had a good nothing up your sleeve number in it, then it could be a different story.
Although there's still this problematic thing that you do have strong indications from the structure of the cipher, or the structure of the random number generator, that you do have the ability to have external numbers which are tied to it. So even if you picked a nothing up your sleeve number, there's still the possibility that you could then do an enormous amount of compute to calculate the set of numbers which would still allow inference of internal state.
Perhaps, but I think if you don't have a special number, you have to have some secret advanced like number theory,
Yeah.
which the NSA could have because they have a lot of very, very good mathematicians.
50 years of classified mathematics.
Yeah. But I guess at one level, cryptography is people have to choose what experts they are going to expose their risks to.
Yeah.
And at least there is a sense of like, if you choose like Dan Bernstein,
Yes.
you aren't going to be the only idiot if it gets out.
Yes.
So it's like
Absolutely.
it's like flying on a jetliner versus building your own aeroplane.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I'm definitely massively against people rolling their own crypto. But what I want to establish is an appropriate degree of paranoia.
Mm-hmm.
Because, what we're discussing here is integrity of human communications.
Yep.
In an age when everything is monitored that can because we would be monitored, and many of the platforms are basically surveillance marketing tools.
Mm-hmm.
So the notion that we have to kind of robustly re-examine the entire ecosystem and figure out where to build,
Mm-hmm.
I think is quite important. So this question of discovering an identity, right? If I want to talk to somebody, I need to retrieve a key.
Mm-hmm.
And right now we're doing that informally by sending the keys over Instant Messenger.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things which hasn't happened yet is large-scale fraud by key substitution.
Mm-hmm.
You send me an email with payment details. I naively assume that because the email came from you, the payment details are correct.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody else has substituted a different key in
Yeah.
the email. I make the payment to the key that I think you gave me. Money goes missing.
Yeah.
And although that attack is largely theoretical at this point, once that kind of stuff starts in earnest, unless we've got really strong mechanisms to be able to manage the namespaces, we're not going to be able to do
Mm-hmm.
that. And that question of how do we bind keys to people or keys to organizations,
Mm-hmm.
we currently have an answer for, which is X509,
Mm-hmm.
aka HTTPS, certificate authorities,
Mm-hmm.
and all that stuff basically has a bunch of global keys,
Mm-hmm.
which then become a bunch of national keys, which are then farmed out to the registrars, who use that chain of authority
Mm-hmm.
to sign a key for you when you come and say, hey, I want an HTTPS cert.
Yep.
And because the registrars are economically incentivized to issue certificates, they don't really check stuff properly, and you get things like people getting a fake Microsoft certificate issued in, was it Finland? Right? Which causes all kinds of mayhem, because to all of the computers in the world, until that certificate is cancelled,
Mm-hmm.
you are Microsoft.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to kind of, just map that out a little so people have it in mind,
Mm-hmm.
so that when we start talking our way through what scuttlebutt is and how it will work,
Mm-hmm.
they've got some notion of where it fits relative to the ecology that we currently use.
Yeah.
Because we're actually all using crypto every day, not just in blockchain applications, but anytime you put a credit card into a computer.
Internet commerce would not be possible without cryptography.
Does everybody remember the internet before internet commerce was possible?
Just about.
Mm-hmm.
Children, there was a time when you could not make a payment on the internet. Everything was public, it lived unencrypted on the wire, even typing your passwords into things was not secure, and we lived through this dark age. The 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was, 98, 99 when we got HTTPS.
Mm-hmm.
One of my friends, Samir Parquet, made an enormous amount of money
Mm-hmm.
with a company called C2 that produced a thing called, was it Stronghold?
Mm-hmm.
I think was the first HTTPS web server.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, this was the Bitcoin of the day, right?
Mm.
We're going to disintermediate everything.
Yep.
Amazon. Right. So, now that we've kind of fleshed out the namespace,
Mm-hmm.
right, and we've got some notion of individuals have a key,
Mm-hmm.
start at the beginning of Scuttlebutt, and just give me, just kind of break
Well-
it down. I'm an individual, I got a key pair, what does Scuttlebutt do for me?
So we kind of came at Secure Scuttlebutt after having sort of learnt about how some security and distribution and stuff, and database replication and that kind of thing came together, and I saw that there was this quite good idea in PGP, but it was poorly implemented. That it had a trust network, which seemed to me intuitively be a pretty good way to assign names to keys in a decentralized way. but it brutally failed by not being fun.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
Yes.
now we have
Quite the opposite of fun.
yeah. They call it a key signing party, but it's not like a party that you or I might enjoy going to. I've actually never been to a key signing party.
I've been to a few. Two long rows of people, mostly still with their rolling luggage or backpacks because they've come straight from the airport to the conference, wherever it is. You know, moving down in lockstep, one at a time, examining each other's passports and typing stuff into their phones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another quick note here is that this idea of like examining someone's passport is like, well, that puts that's one version of identity. You can be all kinds of, you don't necessarily want to be the same person that the government thinks you are.
Yeah.
For example, musicians and artists quite frequently like create a new identity to release new material on, so that they can see how well that stands on its own.
Yes.
Without associating it with their more successful name or something like that.
Yep. Yep.
So I sort of I took sort of those ideas, but also the sort of playbook, some moves out of the like Web 2.0 playbook, where in Web 2.0 they sort of, social media and stuff, they design a thing. They don't sell the product, the app, to your rational mind.
Yes.
It's entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
They make a thing that is just sticky. It's engaging. You use it because you enjoy using it.
Yes.
You don't need to think about why you use it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why
this is meant to be fun, right?
Yeah, but then you can come by and interpret those things. Mm-hmm. So you can look at Twitter and you can be like, oh, Twitter is actually a trust network.
Yes.
Because when you follow someone, you were saying this is an interesting human being or a very clever bot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But if you only follow a couple hundred people, you have been like, these are the usernames that I think are interesting out of the entire internet.
Yes.
That's actually a very strong signal.
Yeah. Yep.
Assuming what you think of my opinion, I mean it's subjective, but from my point of view, I'm like, these are real.
Yeah.
And then if those people say that these other things are real, that's a good thing.
So you have this kind of, it's like a preponderance of evidence, weight of circumstance.
Yeah, you can interpret it like that.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that the users of Twitter are thinking about that when they do it.
They didn't necessarily build it that way, but that's what you get.
Yeah.
I see.
So, I think you should look at like what is when you should look at the meaning of an action in terms of like the way that like Wittgenstein would, with like what does it do, what effects does this have?
Okay, bulk that out a little more.
Well,
I've read many things.
For example,
Wittgenstein is not one of them.
For example, a like button,
yes,
or favorite button on Twitter. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
so kind of in a signs and signifiers way.
Well, just because it says favorite doesn't mean that that's your favorite tweets.
Yeah.
People use it in a multiple of ways.
Yeah. Like I use it for bookmarking.
Yeah, you can use it for bookmarking, but also since it notifies the author of those tweets, it's a way of like acknowledging that to them. Yeah. Like it's kind of a way of like you can say thank you to them or be like, I read this.
Yes.
Without adding any extra content.
Yes.
It's a good thing to use at the end of a conversation when you don't want to keep replying and fighting over who gets the last word. You just like the thing that you think is basically the end of the conversation.
Exactly. It's like smile and nod sort of thing.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And like last year there was a time where Twitter tried to drive engagement, tried to turn likes into retweets.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, no, this is like it's not. There's a retweet for a reason.
Yes. Yeah.
And
the same thing with this commenting of tweets that we have now.
Where you link it.
Yeah. And there used to be this kind of fine art of retweeting something and shortening it, and that limited the length of a retweet chain because you could either stop crediting people, or you could or you just ran out of space as the list of vias got longer and longer and longer.
Yeah.
And so it naturally expired stuff,
Mm-hmm.
which on one hand made Twitter less viral, but on the other hand enforced a certain kind of locality.
Mm-hmm.
And Twitter has now lost all locality. It's
Yeah.
become this single rolling space of global memes.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the locality was a lot of what made it interesting. It felt like a
Yeah.
place because, the stuff that kind of got retweeted as the retweet, via chain got longer and longer and longer. The messages got more and more and more compressed and lossy and noisy.
Mm-hmm.
So it gave you this spatiality.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of Paleo Chat?
No.
So David Brin, the sci-fi author,
Mhm.
who also wears a big engineering hat, has a thing called Paleo Chat, which is meant to be a chat room environment, which includes a whole bunch of usability features which make it akin to physical space.
Oh, wow.
Like it's got facing, you can turn towards things,
Mm-hmm.
and you can listen to them in a way that you can't if you're turned away from them.
Oh, that's amazing.
And it's got all kinds of things like this. There's a demo that he's doing for people that I've signed up to a couple of times and I've just never been able to make.
Mhm.
But they have little group demos where you actually get to see Paleo Chat. But he's done a ton of thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that feels to be like it's a really conceptually important thing.
Yes.
I heard about it a few years ago and my antenna were just like, ding! And Paleo Chat.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
David Brin, #1 smart man.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, how this relates to Web of Trust for crypto keys
Yes.
is like if you made basically a decentralized Twitter sort of kind of social media thing, people interact and you can interpret those interactions as signals of
Yep.
trust signals and so on.
Yep.
So basically you can interpret, because of spam, every interaction on a computer is a Turing test. And if you click spam or delete or unfollow that person, that means you have failed they have failed a kind of test.
Yeah.
But the ones you continue to interact with
Yeah.
are the identities that are real. And you might know someone only as an avatar and a name, and it doesn't really matter. You can still have a relationship with whatever that is. It doesn't. It's not really a. I think this is one of the nice parts of the internet is that you can have you can present yourself however you like.
Yeah.
Um,
Right, so you've got this ability to generate these kind of personas, but you're suggesting that they're basically performed into existence.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and that's one place on a spectrum of identity. That's sort of that's more to one end where you have a pseudonymous performative situation, but I think that is the superset of the you can fit like a global public identity into that just by associating one of these performant identities with your physical body.
Yeah.
Um,
That's interesting. So you've got potentially a set of performative identities, but you link them to your physical body as a way of kind of credentialing them, something like that.
Yeah, well, for whatever purpose they deem them to serve.
I'm quite interested in things like certificates of biometric uniqueness, so that you can prove in some kind of zero knowledge way that every single person in an auction binds to a different biological human being.
Yeah, that's a very difficult problem, because so you can, in a decentralized way, you can prove that a public key, you really own a public key,
Yes.
but you can't prove that you own an iris,
Yes.
because iris is a symmetrical cryptography, essentially.
Yeah.
Your fingerprints might be unique, but you leave them on everything you touch.
Yeah, absolutely. The password you can't change.
Yeah, exactly. So,
So the approach that I took to this was that you would have things that were like biometric notaries. So you could turn up in a bank or something like that. Slap your keys and your head on the table,
yeah.
and they would then perform the binding for you. And what they would issue would be a certificate of insurance that these two human beings were not the same person. Right? We
Yeah.
have seen A, we have seen B.
Yeah.
Both of our branches verify that they do not have matching biometrics,
Yeah.
therefore they're not the same person.
Yeah.
We can vouch for that. And what they would give you would be a digital certificate ensuring that up to $1 million, $2 million, $5 million.
Sure.
and the more expensive the transaction, the more they would charge for that certificate of insurance. So the business model would be insurance against identity fraud, and that's what they would use to pay for the hardware. But I couldn't think of anything short of that would work.
Well, when you get to, like, what is this important for?
Well, so it's incredibly important in situations where you don't want to disclose an identity. So I walk up to, a car rental place with a certificate that says, here's $150,000 worth of insurance that I am known to, let's say, Citibank. Right?
Yep.
Citibank has my biometrics on file.
Yep.
Here's a cert. You can verify that cert applies to me, but we're not going to give you any of my identity information. So what I get of you is insurance rather than identity. And at that point, you could potentially move through the world relatively anonymously, because your conduct is vouched for by your insurers. It's a kind of an insurance-centric model, because I only need to know your identity if I want to recover costs against you if you do something criminal. Whereas if I could just prove that I have insurance to do this, you could just let me run around like a crazy person, because if something goes wrong, you can sue. And I think that approach, where basically people are preceded by this kind of like, this nimbus of insuredness. I have the nimbus of insuredness. I can absolutely take this jet ski through the streets of Amsterdam, or whatever it happens to be. Like, you can imagine people being, indemnified to do all kinds of otherwise forbidden behaviour because this nimbus of insurance. Everybody is just like, well, if this goes wrong, we get entertainment and money.
Though I'm not sure that actually necessarily requires biometrics. Like, it doesn't. The point, I think, where like that you are one unique person becomes important is things where you want to have some kind of voting, fair voting, where this many entities can vote on thing and will pick the most popular answer, and you want to avoid a Sybil attack.
Yes.
Which is Sybil attack was known under many other names as well. Sybil attack is the computer science term, but you have in politics you have astroturfing, where you hire a fake grassroots movement. We've seen some Sybil attacks. You get sock puppets. Where so Gamergate recently was a Sybil attack.
Seas of sock puppets.
Massive amounts of like fake accounts pretending to that were really controlled by FIFE, pretending to have a massive support and basically being a big nuisance. And the also on things like eBay and so on, you have a problem where you could create a fake version by generating a whole bunch of generating other accounts, pretending to trade with yourself.
Yes, absolutely.
And then it would create a good feedback, and then the websites that pointed at this one website and get a few links onto their websites and stuff like this. Like, it wasn't too hard to fool a few people like that, and since you would start with an equal weighting, you could do that.
Yeah, everything pulls up from there.
Yeah, and one global calculation is feasible for Google. And in Secure Scuttlebutt, basically each peer does their own calculation starting with them.
I see.
So it's like everyone gets their own calculation. And since it's just a network of humans rather than of websites, it doesn't really matter that one person doesn't have to calculate the entire internet, just the part of the network that they might touch.
Yeah, I see.
So it's like their friends and their friends of friends and maybe one more hop, and if they want to ask for, like, if you wanted to find a taxi driver or something like this, you could ask in an unfamiliar place, you could ask one of your connections that links you to that place. And by the nature of social networks, it's only a few hops to go anywhere in the world.
Yes.
So you can get an introduction to take you to those places.
So there's a whole bunch of structured stuff that potentially flows over the initial network.
Yes.
So I think we've gotten a long way down a bunch of extremely interesting rabbit holes without actually giving a top-down description of what Secure Scuttlebutt is.
Yeah. So basically, it's a decentralized database that maps very closely to a social media, any kind of social media application.
Okay, so decentralized encrypted Twitter, but made for high bandwidth communication between machines?
Well, I wouldn't put the emphasis on high bandwidth communication. I would call it a persistent. Basically, you have each, like on Twitter, you have a feed.
Yeah.
Your Twitter feed, and you can tweet, and it adds new things at the end.
Mm-hmm.
We have the same thing. You have an append-only structure, so you can say a thing, then later you can say another thing.
Yeah.
And you can say another thing, and you are the only one who can write to your feed.
Yes. So I've got a key pair. I make a statement. I sign the statement.
Mm-hmm.
I put the statement into this
Mm-hmm.
mumble decentralized database.
Yep.
Okay. Go on.
And then people follow each other, who they want to, who they're interested in, and then so you follow feeds that interest you for some reason,
Mm-hmm.
and then your computer will replicate those onto your things, and then you'll have them offline.
Yeah.
That means, since they're signed, it means you can pass them on to other people as well. So that has the neat property that the uptime for any particular node, the requirements of the SLA, the service level agreement,
Yes.
is very low.
So I pop online. I grab a whole bunch of stuff from all of my friends
Mm-hmm.
who've got cached copies of it.
Mm-hmm.
I then reassemble that into a time stream and read it.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody else wants any of that stuff, they can come get it off me.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Got it.
Yep. And because it has this, because you keep it locally and have like this gossip structure, it has some neat things like it works both local Wi-Fi. So if you're both on the same Wi-Fi,
Mm-hmm.
you can detect each other and replicate.
Yep.
And so imagine zombie apocalypse. All of the national scale infrastructure has failed.
Yes.
Your fiber stopped working.
No.
Sorry. Well, you've got solar panels and diesel generator. Some, and then
Don't ask what's in the other apocalypse boxes.
As long as you've got some, enough to keep your Wi-Fi network running.
Yep.
Then what you could do is you can still establish a network of other strongholds that you are friends with, and you just need to send runners or drones to them occasionally, and you've still got completely you can have a completely functional knowledge infrastructure.
So somebody has the job of going around Berlin on a bicycle, just basically
That would work fine.
reconnecting the entire messages because they've got some kind of Wi-Fi gear in the back of the bike.
Yep, that would work fine.
Yeah.
Or just
So
as
super useful.
people casually travel would work like this. Basically, you're ready, and because there's places on Earth that are basically already the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah. Collapse means living in the same conditions as the people who grow your coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so that is a basic kind of top-down description.
Mm-hmm.
I've got information, I sign it, I publish it, it goes into a decentralized database,
Mm-hmm.
it gets carried around by anybody that happens to have a piece of the database.
Mm-hmm.
So you're traveling, I interrogate your computer and say, hey, here are the 58 people that I'm following
Mm-hmm.
that you're also following, can you give me the most recent updates you have from them? Got it.
Yep.
Got it. And I mean, that sounds like a very flexible, very generic thing.
Yeah.
This is infrastructure, right? This is pipes.
Yeah.
What is the status of the pipes? How much of that stuff is written? How much of it is theory?
Well, we've got a couple of there's already a couple of applications built on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a Patchwork and which is basically just a social media discussion platform.
Yep.
There's Git SSB, which gives you a decentralized GitHub that has repos, pull requests, issues.
Wow.
That works.
Fully decentralized.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So and then
Wow.
there's a SoundCloud clone called Ferment,
Wow.
which you can post music on, and it then replicates the audio over BitTorrent.
Oh, that's delightful.
Yeah.
That's delightful.
That was made by from Matt McKeag. Cell made but Git SSB. Paul Fressy and myself made the patchwork stuff. Another guy, Anzus, has just recently started working on DNSSB, which is DNS over this over secure scuttlebutt. I think this is going to be interesting because he's going to have to really hammer down how naming works.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
so this is actually one interesting thing. It's like perhaps the key point in the user experience where where Patchwork diverges from what you're used to on Facebook is that, or Twitter, is that you're not guaranteed a globally unique name.
Right.
You have a globally unique identity, which is your public key.
Yes.
But then your name is just what people call you.
So here we insert Zuko's triangle.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And
we'd better summarize Zuko's triangle.
so what is it? Human memorable. So one corner, human memorable, secure, and decentralized.
Yeah.
And we are it says choose two.
Yeah.
We are trying to basically go somewhere in the middle area.
Well, I mean, Namecoin was the first thing that I saw that fixed this. Like, the point where I really began to take blockchain seriously was Namecoin.
Mm-hmm.
Because Bitcoin, I'm just like, it's another currency. We've had currencies, they don't do anything. Then I saw Namecoin, saw that it basically squared Zuko's triangle, and it was like, oh, okay, this blockchain thing is a fundamental breakthrough. Because if you could fix the naming problem, you could fix the world.
Yeah.
In a very direct sense. The fact that all of our computing resources are organized by archaic national boundary lines, .co, .cn, .in, .uk, .us. The fact that we carried all of that nationalism into the computer network. One of my kind of favourite counterfactuals is what would have happened if the first heavy users of the internet had been librarians and they just ported the Dewey Decimal System for the internet namespace. Right? So you'd have this single global unique hierarchical namespace for everything divided by categories of knowledge, and rather than reifying .mx for Mexico and .cn for China, you'd have had whatever, 151, history of the Western world, history of the Western world's contact with Asia, and you could basically go down this thing, even though that thing bakes in a whole bunch of completely archaic and bizarre assumptions.
Yeah.
They're just different, bizarre, and archaic assumptions. But I keep thinking like how different the internet would feel if it had been organised on Dewey rather than on nation state. You'd still have these enormously viciously guarded turf boundaries, but it would be the mathematicians and the physicists arguing about who got their own calculus, or whatever it would be. You know what I'm saying? It would be that kind of thing.
Although on the next layer down, on the IP layer, that I think is necessarily geographical, because you were saying like
It's
where do I send
routability?
Yeah, I've got a where do I send this packet? Which direction do I send it? To the east or do I send it to the west?
Yes. Yes. Here's a switch. Here's two cables. Which cable do you want the message sending down? I think we should take a 5-minute break. I'm going to basically put the kettle on, make a cup of tea for folks.
Right.
By all means, continue gossiping, but it will get a little noisy while the kettle's on.
Right.
Tea, coffee,
Have a tea.
tea. Well, caffeinated, lemon and ginger.
Oh, just like an Earl Grey or something.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Sorry, I'm really on some phone today.
There are grey days in winter.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nasty.
No, fit for an umbrella with me. I have got some kind of waterproof jacket.
You definitely want to take a nap.
Yeah, I will. What's going on with David?
I think the plan is that Stuart is going to come over here sometime early this evening and drop off some stuff.
Okay.
And then we will traipse down there and stay.
Stuart wanted my spare ticket, so I still have that. Well, the physical ticket, obviously.
Yeah.
But I need to talk to him about changing it so that Stuart could use it.
I'm just going to leave the break in the video. This is kind of one of the things that I've discovered that if you do things in a way that looks like anything you could do in a boat, people find it so much more accessible. The trade-off between like
Yeah. Yes, I have experienced this as well. Like, I have this wacky bicycle that it's a folding bike turns into a recumbent bicycle by welding on a few bits and cutting off a few bits and stuff like this. But I was inspired by, this, I don't remember his name, but the microchip guy. He's like, he in the early 80s, he decided, he was like probably the first to decide to donate. I think he might have like, yes,
bicycle thing.
yes, that's it, yeah. I was like, should better do that with mostly off the shelf parts
I'm
now.
a huge fan of that.
Yeah. And I bought this folding bicycle, this really rugged folding bicycle in Cambodia for $38.
Whoa.
And brought it back to New Zealand in plane, and then in in friends' houses with their friends' tools, basically, recompensized it, and then but it's like the bowsprit is like blue and the back is red, and when I ride past it, it's like obviously something is weird, and it looks rather like I made it myself.
Yes.
And it means like a lot of people just like stop and talk to me about it. But especially interesting is it across like social economic groups. More like I found that the more like educated, refined middle class people, they'll look, but they're much less likely to say something than so I was in California and had like far more black people talk to me than ever before. Suddenly they had a
because you've got a thing that's just it's handmade and acted together.
and yeah, exactly. Obviously, with that. And another time I built this sailing canoe. It was like outrigger, like Polynesian style outrigger canoe, and the sail was made of a tarpaulin, bright blue stuff, and so it's like instantly everyone could relate to this because they use this to cover the trash and then they go to the dump and stuff like that. So it was like instantly I wasn't some rich fuck with a fancy boat. I was like
some madman. I would love to do a podcast that is just you describing things that you have built. It could be like a slideshow with pictures.
Oh, we could do that.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Actually, it'd make a good stage show, right? Like here's my kind of vacation pictures. Because you've done so many completely batshit things. Amazing.
I wouldn't want to borrow my story on the internet because then I can't like
Yeah,
other
then you
people
can't tell.
there.
Yeah. True enough. I think it's an amazing thing. I've had my fair share of wacky adventures, but the only thing I ever built was the damn hexayurt.
Well, you can see it's still pretty good.
Well, I mean, a lot of the things which make the hexayurt great are things which are a product of me building something simple enough that I could build it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, I don't really have great making skills.
Yeah.
But
That's the brilliant thing about it.
Yeah.
Is that it's a thing you want to build.
I mean, so much I found that my actual impact in the world is defined by my disability.
Yeah.
It's the dyslexia, it's the slight cat-handedness, it's the fear of power tools.
Yeah.
It's all of that stuff combined.
Yeah.
That means that I have to build things which are simple enough for me,
Mm-hmm.
and if they're simple enough for me, they're simple enough for anybody.
Yep.
It's odd that working around a deficit actually turns out to be for mostly creative powers.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, very often that's the case.
I just didn't realise quite as degree which applied to me.
That's the like punk rock way rather than the prog rock way.
Oh, that's interesting. Punk rock versus prog rock is
Yeah.
two kind of poles of a that's fascinating. Huh. Yeah, that's remarkable. Glasses for tea.
Thank you very much.
Tea. That was water.
That one's good.
Yeah.
That's T, isn't it?
Mhm.
It's a lovely device.
Mhm.
Yeah, the really clever thing about this is the screw threading on that.
Mhm.
Yeah, those are great. I've got
Oh,
one.
on the inside, which means this can turn.
And it only needs a very, very few number of turns to get it completely closed or completely opened.
Mhm.
So it's like, I don't know, a half a turn or something like that, maybe a full turn. It's got distinctly wintry out there. Right, let's crack on. Should I pour?
Yeah.
This is my other great kind of domestic innovation is tea and thermos flasks. Because there's nothing worse than making tea and then the tea is cold. You
Yeah.
want more tea.
Yeah.
So tea and thermos flasks. It does tend to oversteep. So
Right.
I always need to pull the tea bags back out, and I haven't found an elegant way of doing it yet.
So you could just put the boiled water in the flask and then make tea on demand with fresh tea bags as you need it.
Yes. Or, potentially I could just ladle out the tea bags. Anyway, we were here to talk about cryptography.
We should do a podcast on, sort of domestic, kind of tips
Oh yeah.
for the household, how to make various different kinds of tea.
I think of
The sous vide cooker, obviously.
the sous vide cooker. I think what we wanted was a 3-ring binder
Mm.
and a case of equipment, which is basically given to the entrepreneurs,
Mhm.
like the ones that have.
Here's how to live cheaply.
Here's how to live cheaply and effectively.
Yeah.
I think the possibility that we could become a YouTube lifestyle brand is, is
Yeah.
something that's going to have to be investigated at some point.
What's that thing with the hairy bikers that cook?
Yeah,
You
some
know,
hairy bikers. Yes.
something like that. I think, we could basically have this kind of fat beard television. But I mean, the quality of life stuff. Like, I'm completely convinced that psychological resilience is massively underpriced at a startup environment.
Mhm. Yeah.
Most companies don't break because they run out of money. They break because they run out of emotional energy.
Yeah.
And the sort of, sacrificial principle thing, which is completely embedded in San Francisco.com culture,
Yeah.
is you basically bleed until you succeed.
Yeah.
And I think that, the VCs have basically inculcated those values into people as a way of separating the people that are really going to do it versus the people that are
Mhm.
basically faking.
Yeah.
The problem is that the psychological toll on the people that really want to do it
Yeah.
is enormous.
Yeah.
And it's not that unusual for the fakers to accidentally become enormously successful.
Mhm.
Like, you go into this thing because it seems better than getting a job, but you turn out to have a knack for it, or you turn out to have exactly
Mhm.
identified some sweet spot in the market. So, often the kind of scheming, conniving, lazy folk who exactly identify the opportunity, will do vastly better than the people that are just incredibly viciously diligent.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I kind of feel like a suffering-free approach
Mhm.
to it, where we accept that high quality of life for the people that are doing the innovating
Mhm.
makes them more likely to succeed. We don't try and char people. We don't use suffering as a threshold to get people into the game. We use competence,
Mhm.
luck. I think that there's a different way of running the equilibrium
Mhm.
than a bunch of starving college students on a 3-month budget.
Mhm.
That could lever what we know about human productivity, what we know about motivation, what we know about resilience, what we know about, frankly, just the shape of the innovation market, and this notion of the 3-ring binder, where it's like, okay, here's your Ocado account, here are the things that will arrive every week. If you want that changed, let us know.
Mhm.
Here's the electric pressure cooker, here's the maid service, here's the, some banquet table. Once a week somebody will come around and cook something really good for you guys and check in how you're doing. And you could kind of go through that list
Mhm.
so that you get this kind of lifestyle package which we think optimizes for psychological resilience and productivity,
Mhm.
rather than this kind of burning of the rocket ship as you hit
Yeah.
re-entry and the hoping that you can
Yeah.
put the wings on before you hit the wall, which is basically the San Francisco mindset.
Yeah. I learned to do this myself from because I started my training for mad science projects, is what I call things like secure scuttlebutt, was sailing, especially solo sailing by myself.
Wow.
Solo sailing, and
Wow.
there's definitely, to be interested in solo sailing, you have to kind of enjoy suffering. But you need to look after yourself so that you can look after the boat, so that the boat can look after you.
Wow.
So you have to deal with fatigue, but you
Yes.
have to manage your fatigue, because if you get too fatigued, that's when you do something. That's when you make bad decisions, and that's when, and basically you could die. And so to stop that, you have to keep 3 steps away from it. Because how something all goes wrong is it's not because just one thing happens out of the blue.
You get
It's an error of
cascades.
a chain of errors.
Yeah.
Where if you prevent them 3 steps away, then you'll have a great time.
Yes.
And if you let the errors compound, then, and the way you do that to prevent the errors compounding is by stopping them before they happen.
Yeah. So you have to. I mean, the sort of equipment thing is 3 means 2, 2 means 1, 1 means none.
Yeah.
That you always have to assume that you're going to lose at least 1. And if that leaves you in a position where if you lose 1 more, you're screwed. You're already screwed.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, somebody said to me once that what makes the difference between professional chefs and sort of sort of enthusiastic amateur cooks is that when professional chefs have finished, the kitchen is cleaner than it was when they started.
Yeah.
And that it's actually the continuous cleaning, which is the critical skill that differentiates the professionals from the amateurs. And that's very, interesting. Same thing with medical procedures. It's the lack of error that's the discriminating factor, and that's largely about teams being in good condition. Checklists.
There's a saying in sailing that you can learn to sail around the bay in the afternoon, but the difference between a good sailor between a bad sailor and a good sailor is what they do in an emergency. And the difference between a good sailor and a great sailor is how many emergencies they get into.
So the very good ones are just emergency avoidant.
Yes, and that means they can do far more extreme things.
Wow. Because you just don't make the little mistakes that accumulate.
Then they can then they can actually sail to Antarctica or something like this because they are
it's a scary thing being on a boat with nothing but your own competence or incompetence. I mean, that's a really I mean, you're a long way from everything.
But the thing, I've never tried to sail to Antarctica.
No.
I'm not claiming to be an expert, but the neat thing about boats is that you can. It doesn't matter how the adventure is in proportion to the boat. So if you have a small crappy boat, you can still have a great adventure only doing a small thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I used to. So my thing was like wandering around. So mostly people that go backpacking are going backpacking to try and get from A to B kind of quickly. Whereas my thing was always just wandering around outdoors. Not really going very far, but going for quite a long time. And the sort of kind of thing that I discovered was the fun only really begins at the end of the gear. So part of the reason that the ultralight hiking community is so incredibly successful is when you're going out with a 10-kilogram pack for everything, the whole process is continuous innovation and continuous improvisation because you just don't have the equipment. So it took lots of things like, I mean, if you're going out with a 40, 50 pound pack at this point, the gear is so good and it's so light that you're basically invulnerable. There's almost nothing that can go wrong. I mean, okay, you could break a leg if you fall over something, but short of that kind of problem, you've got so many layers of resilience in a 40, 50 pound pack that it becomes more or less mechanistic to just tromp through the woods. There's no point where you see the edge of the horizon and have to start moving.
Interesting.
But if you go out with a 10-kilogram pack, even relatively simple things become genuinely hard to the point where you actually get the activation of the deeper kind of faculties.
Except for carrying your gear.
Yes, that's the one thing that's easier.
And I think that stuff is also interesting. Like, I like to go camping with like minimal improvised stuff because I feel that going out into nature is about rethinking your relationship with society. So if you do it with stuff you've made yourself, then you're much more in control of that relationship.
Yeah.
If you do it with expensive equipment that you've bought that came through some complicated supply chain, then you are more tied. Your umbilical to society is stronger than it is if you had, made it from sort of ubiquitous materials or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I mean that notion that there's a kind of fun perimeter, which is some interaction between environment and equipment, and you just wind up with this kind of margin.
Yeah.
I think there's a real deep principle there that again we just don't have much of a name for.
Right.
Another place it shows up is peak oil.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the kind of transition times thing was this idea that if you reduce your demand for oil faster than the supply reduces,
then you experience abundance.
Exactly, right. Yeah. Whereas if you reduce more slowly than demand reduces, you wind up with this crunch. And this idea that you kind of have a sweet spot that is just inside the parameter of the space, and that you can, if you learn how to steer into that sweet spot, you stay in a good condition, even in relatively bad conditions.
Yep.
So, we don't really have a way of saying you have such good equipment that you will not have any that you will not enjoy this. Right. It's quite hard. We don't have a ready language for you are over-equipped. You will not enjoy this, not because you're carrying too much, but because you've closed up all the gaps where you'd have had to actually do something that felt challenging, that felt interesting, that felt different. And there's lots of things about this notion of the kind of almost like thermostatic controls for optimizing for where the good part is of a system that has lots of dimensions. Yeah. We just don't have a good language for that kind of stuff.
It's like a balance between too easy and too hard.
Yeah. And I bet there's some language somewhere where they've got a huge thing on that.
Well, there's the flow state, but that doesn't really.
It's not quite it. But Japanese, Chinese, there are lots of concepts for states of being that we don't have great names for. I mean, the whole wabi-sabi, like the brokenness, the beauty of things which are broken. That whole kind of a thing. There must be, somebody will have a bunch of words that we could go and pinch. From Taoism or from or Japanese, whatever it would be, craft probably. The notion that you're making something which is at exactly the right level of difficulty. I wouldn't be at all surprised if there's a Japanese word for, the apprentice is making something that is at the right level of difficulty for them to learn. They will not fail, but they will not easily succeed. There's the correct fit between the thing and the task.
Yeah.
And we just don't have the words.
Having good words is very important. Have you heard of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis?
Yes.
So the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is this idea that you can't, if you don't have the right language for things, then you can't think those thoughts. And at the time, they proposed a quite strong version of that like these ideas were simply invisible to you. Like nowadays, no one proposes like that serious an idea, but there's a even better way of putting it that I read was there's mold theories of language and cloak theories. And a mold theory means that language shapes your thought. And a cloak theory says that your language drapes over and reveals the shape of your thought.
There's an underlying structure in there.
That the cloak theory doesn't really tell you much about language. But the mold theory I think is more interesting. And then we can sort of talk about like we can actually sense the mold, and this is what's happening here. It's like there should be a word here, but we can't. We haven't created it yet.
We don't have it.
That's where we can feel the language mold, but we're like, let's like chip through this bit, and then maybe we'll have a flow through there.
I have a definite belief that we are in a position where our inability to form new language is becoming like the critical cultural bottleneck. Things are changing so quickly. Like, Alexa, what time is it?
5 p.m.
Right. So, Alexa, what time is it?
The time is 1:46 p.m.
Right. And, it's like, when did that happen, right? It happened yesterday because I Amazon Primed a hockey pack that I plugged in that understands what I say when I ask it things and always plays the wrong music when I ask it to play music. So if you listen to statistically improbable stuff, it doesn't have enough trading data. Right? So, the VR rig, right? You bring this thing up here, an entire world of weirdness explodes out of it. Amazon Prime now, which is just insane. Like, I've had people just drop their jaws when, it's like, yeah, we need a such and such. And then an hour and a half later, somebody knocks on the door and hands it to me.
Mm-hmm.
What a feast. The fiber broadband that actually works. It tick, 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 tick. We're just in this environment where, I'm beginning to see this definite perimeter of things are really changing.
Mm-hmm.
But my ability to describe experiences in VR.
Mm-hmm.
No, we don't. Not yet.
Not yet.
Certainly.
And my guess is that the VR tech is going to improve so rapidly that we never build the words because the language formation is in permanent lag behind the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that has never happened to humans before. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like this notion that we've got this frayed edge where the language formation mechanism is just tattered by the rate of change, and you just have these ripped shreds of language floating in the breeze trying to wrap themselves around meaning which changes too quickly to escape. Yeah, it's almost the kind of thing that would make you want to pay poets to just sit inside a VR to make the metaphor.
Yeah.
Well, there's plenty of spare talent and poets that isn't being used for any commercial purpose.
Mhm.
Oh god, we've just figured out how to instrumentalize poetry. Okay.
Secure Scuttlebutt also has this problem, incidentally, because a lot of the words we have for thinking about, like, organising people are intrinsically centralised. So people will maybe tell someone about Secure Scuttlebutt and they're like, oh, how do I sign up for that? And I was like, well, you don't sign up.
Yeah.
There is no such thing as sign up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Signing up is like a medieval term, where it's like you want to join a guild, and they'll write your name in some kind of book.
Yeah.
Then you can accelerate that technology by printing presses and stuff like this. But basically, you get to HTTP, and HTTP works exactly like a bookshelf. You can put a book on the shelf, and you can get a book from the shelf.
Yep.
But it's totally about this, like, it's basically just works just like before HTTP. You had there were things like the Whole Earth Guide, where you would get the book, then you would follow links by writing a letter to someone, and then they would send you more reading material.
Yes.
And that stuff had been the postal internet has been happening since, like, it's been hundreds of years old now, since the penny post. So that was when the information revolution started.
Yeah.
When you began to get, once you had it was cheap to send letters, it was, worthwhile learning to read and write, and you started to get in the industrializing European countries a pretty high level of
ongoing
literacy.
kind of literacy explosion. Because I remember this. Yeah. And all the stuff around the early days of blogging, that it was this kind of whole rebirth of the written word.
Yep.
People were learning how to write well because it was suddenly there was immediate feedback, this kind of thing.
And it's kind of funny because that followed on from a cultural period where we were really talking about the death of the written word. I mean, people, this happens, people are always talking about this kind of thing. It turns out that it never really goes away. In fact, there are many more words now than there used to be. The production of information, the production of words is going up and is accelerating, if anything. And the sheer number of text messages, WhatsApp messages, Facebook messages, we're actually doing a lot more text than we used to be.
Absolutely. And innovative text, like much as we slag emoticons and all the rest of this stuff, there are things like, have you seen this thing with the hamster and the large piece of kind of rubber cheese?
No?
So it's possibly the greatest animated GIF in human history.
Right.
So there's a hamster with a large piece of rubber cheese in its mouth, and it's kind of walking forward looking very cheerful, and then you see the snout of a large dog come into view, grab the rubber cheese and pull it, and the hamster comes with it, and it just goes and just vanishes off screen. I posted it on Twitter a couple of days ago under the title, learning about startup acquisitions. And, having seen that thing, like, there's a particular quality of, like, zoop, which, now that I've seen it, that's not going to be a mental referent for me for a particular kind of, kind of lifted and taken thing.
So I think the interesting thing is that you see this if you look at histories of old dialect words. A lot of them there will be a lot of dialect words about animals. There'll be a lot of dialect words about physical work, injury, feelings of tiredness, feelings of things related to the kind of agricultural existence that people were in. They had all these kinds of words where every region had different dialect words. Even within a country that has a single language, there'll be all kinds of local dialect words for these things.
Yes.
Because they needed them. They needed to have them in their everyday existence to refer to very often very subtle, sometimes very specific, the precise noise that a dog makes when it can, when it's trying to, catch a rat or something like that. Because that would occur often enough that it would be worth having a word to refer to those things, and you needed to communicate with people about them. So we definitely have the ability to develop those new words. The question is, do any meanings stay fixed long enough that we can put a word on them, and then that becomes the word and everyone can kind of agree.
There's
on it.
also a huge amount of words in a phrases in English that have like obscure, they have like came from particular like occupations or something. So like I was doing some research, naming research to think about what I'm going to name this thing, this code thing I'm writing, and my thing had to do with logs and streams. So it's like, what about the act of floating logs down a river?
Yeah.
So I was digging around here and I found that the phrase high and dry comes from log rafting.
Really?
So if the logs got stuck in the shallows, so they would try to float the logs down on the snowmelt.
Yeah.
If they get stuck in the shallows and the water went down, they won't be able to refloat those. They won't be able to get the value out of those logs until next summer.
Right.
They are high and dry.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Because they're out of the water and you can't move them until the next snowmelt.
Yep.
That's amazing.
There's also like a whole lot of words that come from that are nautical phrases. Like give someone a lot of leeway.
Yeah.
Take the wind out of their sails.
Yes.
Yes. I don't like the cut of their jib.
Yeah.
Is a good one. These are all like actually have very specific and sensible meanings in sailing, but they're just in common English. But my favourite one, pipe dream. What kind of pipe is it?
Opium pipe.
That's correct. Yeah. But most people don't realise they're making a hardcore drug reference.
Yeah.
You are probably the first person I have spoken to that got it immediately.
Well, it was the nautical thing, right? So I assumed it come from sailors.
Right.
Going to the Far East.
Yeah.
Right, because Brits wouldn't have really easy access to opium. This kind of Oriental drug den kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that phrase is sort of old now that completely square people use that. Use that phrase. Without realizing what it means, but
interesting. So this notion that language formation is a key thing. I mean, I don't even know how we would build social structures or tools to accelerate language formation. But the notion that we've got this kind of entire suite of new technologies. Charades, right? Describe this to me in a way that I understand often enough. Because frankly, we failed this with blockchain, right? We spent years trying to form language around blockchain, and we still have to describe everything from scratch every time. We just didn't make it. But it's interesting on the other side of this, right? So we were talking about this kind of decline of the written word thing followed by the explosion. There was the decline of attention span. Everybody was watching 2-minute videos on YouTube, and then there was the enormous explosion of the boxed set series at a time, take a weekend off thing. So there's some kind of pendulum where it's almost like as the culture moves one way, interesting stuff grows in the edges. So the notion that poetry might be basically a derelict form because poets won't write about technology and that's where we need them.
Yeah, I'm going to push back slightly on this idea that there is a pendulum, that these are fundamentally different forms. They're different forms, but I don't think this implies that that there's any great changes occurring in human attention span at any point. Because one of the things that's really interesting about a lot of internet communications is that they're fragmentary. It's a single tweet here, it's a blog post there. It's rather than sitting down and reading a novel, we might read the same number of words but spread across a whole number of different things. But what this actually optimizes for is I think I got this from Tyler Cowen, is the ability to follow a narrative. Is actually the ability to figure out how these things are connected together.
Ah, that's interesting.
So actually, you're taking in all of this information, but you're also working really hard to reconstruct how these things are connected to each other.
Hence the love of things like ARGs.
But what this looks like is it looks like shallowness and superficiality, because you're just taking these bite-sized chunks in.
Yeah.
What nobody can see is what's going on inside your head, which is that you're then building this into a mental model.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, the novel in that case, then or the long-form book comes out looking like the lazy option, because it's just laid out for you end to end.
Yeah.
You just follow it in the order that it's in, and you don't even need to do the work.
Ah, that's fascinating.
So, depending on the perspective that you look at it, you can make a case going either way.
Mm-hmm.
And it may well be the case that actually, the level of actual change may not be that great. It's just we haven't really understood the medium yet.
Yeah. And I mean, that haven't really understood the medium yet, I think, is the core conclusion that I'm coming to with all this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, when Scuttlebutt is, largely adopted, which I think is very likely. It's got all the right properties. We're in this kind of gap of trust with Twitter, where we've already gotten the feeling that it's in the cycle of decline that always happens to the platform.
Yeah.
Everybody is looking for the encrypted Twitter clone.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a bunch of infrastructure which covers the encrypted Twitter niche and a bunch of other things. It seems very likely to me that will go places and succeed. But, as that happens, the notion that you have this kind of protocolized distributed messaging service thing, I wonder whether we'll wind up having to make that look exactly like web-based social media, or whether we'll actually wind up in a position where people are ready to absorb a new set of interface metaphors, a new set of paradigms, and it turns into something new.
I think some people often say, oh no, if it's not like exactly the same, then it's too hard for people.
Yeah.
And that's bullshit. People are pretty what fucking monkeys that can read and write and drive cars and fly in airplanes, like
Some of us could read and write and drive cars.
Yeah, so we're pretty good at actually adapting to things, as long as the amount of new things you need to learn is manageable.
Yes.
So like even the web, it's point and clicking and stuff like this. But
Yeah.
one thing you need to understand is like how URLs work.
Yes.
You don't need to understand, like it doesn't really. The URLs are pretty opaque, but you can copy the URL and you can paste it into an email, and someone can click on that.
Yes.
That's the important thing about URLs. That the
social
URL represents
interface.
where you are.
Yeah.
That is pretty. That is one of the things. That's kind of like, to drive a car, you need to know how steering works.
Yes.
And how it brakes and how to change gears and stuff like that.
Yes.
You can't get away from learning that, even if you don't have to work on the engine yourself, which is which you kind of had to do in the early cars. Horses had a much more intuitive interface.
After a few thousand years of riding them.
Yeah.
I bet the first interaction with the horse was not intuitive.
No. But you could have put a horse interface on a car. It just would have retarded the development of cars significantly.
Oh man, that would have been amazing.
Because you're like, okay, you flick the reins when you want the car to go faster.
I'm pretty sure something along these lines did in fact exist.
Wow.
Some kind of fake horse's head that would sit on the front of the car to make it feel like you were riding a horse. I can't remember where I've seen that, but I'm pretty sure it exists.
I'm just imagining the saddle that you sit on with the reins for steering.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure that existed as well.
Oh man, we've got to find pictures of that. Because having that on something that looked like a tarot card and just being able to play it. You see what I'm saying? Like, here's what we've learned. Again, it's the
You're building faster horses.
Faster horses.
Yeah.
Chris Locke used to talk about that, Rage Boy. But that notion of being able to slap down, pictures of these accommodation errors from previous technologies to describe what's happening as new stuff comes in. I mean, the blockchain world is filled with that. Oh, it's just like money. It's not just like money. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So people are often say like, well, asymmetric cryptography is too hard. People don't get it. Yeah. But I disagree.
And this is a naming problem, right? We should have called it one key cryptography and two key cryptography. 60% of the problem would have gone right there.
Yeah. Also, I would like my so I argue you could actually explain it much more simply in a way that people can really grasp. So, for example, Rumpelstiltskin. You familiar with the story Rumpelstiltskin? Rumpelstiltskin is actually about Bitcoin.
Okay.
You're going to have to tell us a
Let me
story.
explain.
Do
okay.
it. Do it.
So, one day there's a miller. He's drunk and he's bragging about how his daughter can spin straw into gold.
Yeah.
Sounds a lot like he's talking about his new shitcoin on Bitcoin Talk. Then the king, maybe a venture capitalist, is like, wow, this sounds really good. You must demonstrate this for me.
Rob, we should definitely do this.
We totally should. Yeah. That sounds amazing.
And so, this is like medieval.
Wait, you're supposed to say no. Anyway.
This is like medieval shit. So he gets the daughter and it's like, okay, puts her in a room with straw and a spinning wheel and it's like, spin this to gold.
Yep.
And or I'll cut off your heads. Because it's brutal medieval shit. I'm not sure if what happens in the modern version of that. No. But she's like, oh my god, like we're talking shit, we don't actually know anything about cryptography. And then an imp appears, or a hacker. And the imp is like, I understand cryptography, I can spin straw into gold for you. And they're like, oh, of course, anything. Like what just name your price. What will you do to help? And it's like, all I want, well, the original story has a few, there's always three things, but he ends up getting their firstborn child.
Yes.
Or maybe a significant share equity slice. And then spins the straw into gold.
Yes.
King's very impressed.
Yep.
Marries the miller's daughter.
Yes.
Or requires their startup. Then a year later, the crown prince, the new baby prince is born. Or the company IPOs.
Yes.
And then the imp reappears and it's like, I'm here for what is mine.
Yes.
Give the baby to me. And they're like, oh no, is there any other way? Is there anything else we can do? We'll give you all of the riches in the kingdom. It's like, I can spin straw into gold. I don't need that.
Yes.
I just want the human soul. And they're like, no. Is there any way at all we can get out of this? And he's like, no, of course not. Not unless you can guess my true name.
Yeah.
Or his private key.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And he absolutely knows that there's no way they could possibly guess it. There's far too much entropy.
Yep.
But the queen doesn't realise that. She's like, okay, I'll guess your name.
Yep.
And he's like, you'll never guess it. But just to humour them, he's like, I'll give you 3 days to try.
Yes.
And so they gather all of the compute in the kingdom together and start trying to generate names.
Yep.
And of course it fails miserably.
Yes.
Every day he comes back and I say, no, none of these are mine. But then he gets cocky. He practices bad endpoint security. And on the third night, a messenger is travelling through the forest and he sees a strange little man dancing around a campfire, singing a song. That goes something like, ha ha ha, tee hee hee, they'll never guess my private key. 3 days is not enough to begin to guess my name is Rumpelstiltskin. And the messenger repeats this story to the queen. She's like, aha! And then when he comes in the morning, they steal all of his bitcoins.
Yep. That's fantastic. That's very, very good.
Absolutely beautiful. Wow. And this, right, is exactly what we should be teaching our children.
Well, we already are.
We just did.
Yeah, well, we've been... Rumpelstiltskin is like at least 500 years old. Well, it was first... 500 years ago, someone bothered to write it down.
Yes.
Nobody knows how old it really is.
There's definitely nothing in it that couldn't have been written 2,000 years before that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
so we've been spending a long time.
The notion of like a true name having a magical power is actually really old.
Goes all the way back.
Yeah.
I'm aware that we are now talking fables and mythology, and we should probably let these nice people go.
Yes, we probably should.
Otherwise, we'll be here in 3 more hours, and so will they. So, once again, tell me who you are.
I'm Dominic Tarr from Secure Scuttlebutt.
I'm Rob Knight from the Venture Capital Project.
With
no formally announced
Hexayurt
name.
Capital Partners.
Oh, something like that. Bye, guys.
Bye.
All right. That was great, Jen. Fantastic.
That was fun. I love that story.
You stopped